Hello guys and welcome in. For today's video, we're going to talk all about the trial Maw of Lorkhaj. This video is going to focus on the basics you need to know to help you have a clean, easy run of normal Maw of Lorkhaj. We are not going to cover veteran mechanics or veteran strategies. These are just tips to help those who have never been in Maw of Lorkhaj before, who are wanting to step into one of their first trials, but wanted something to give them a little bit of a primer before going in. Today we're going to cover 4 different points of view: a solo tank, off-tank position, healer position, and damage dealer position. So with that, let's get started. The first position that we're going to cover is solo tanking. For this one is kind of easier as compared to being off tanking because either you have it taunted or you don't. There's no having to coordinate with another tank. Key enemies to note are going to be the Sun Eaters. These are mages wearing dresses, only move very little. We have archers with bows. These are going to be ones that are harder to move because they like to stay at range, so you need to use line of sight, like I've done here, to get them stacked up. And then you have your melee sword and board and maul enemies that will follow you wherever, so long as you have them taunted. For the first boss in Maw of Lorkhaj, there's not much of note anymore with how high the average group damage is. Just keep the boss taunted. If you see any rogue smaller cats, try to chain them in. Otherwise, just wait for the damage dealers to parse them down. Don't worry about your screen turning blue. Most groups can finish that mechanic before you would take any negative effects from this. After that first boss, a common skip is to hug these rocks right on the right side. And then, once you go past this little tree, you're going to encounter new types of enemies, ogres. The key ones to take note of are the shaman and the renderer. Make sure to taunt the renderer first, since this is the heaviest hitter and you don't want it whacking your DPS, and then try to stack him on top of the shaman that they die together. After that, we start seeing the same types of enemies before with Sun Eaters, archers, the melee guys, so take the archer, range taunt him, try to get him stacked on that Sun Eater, and then pull the melee ones on top of the Sun Eater. After that, we get this room that can be a little challenging for a solo tank. You're going to get waves of ogres, waves of those Khajiit enemies, and just do your best to try to get things stacked up by using the method of bringing the melee enemies, the one with the sword and board, the ones with the maul, and stack them on top of the archer. And then these renderers, if they're allowed to live long enough, they do that channeled yell that needs to be interrupted before it goes off so that you don't get knocked on your butt, but that doesn't happen every time, and on normal, it's not that big of a deal. But if you just want to make this pull go faster, again, stacking everything up will help your DPS to do more damage. After those waves of trash, we then have the boss fight that most people consider why you can't solo tank this, but it's actually pretty easy so long as your DPS don't kill you, the tank. So it's easy for you to tank it solo unless your DPS want you dead, like apparently mine did here. All you need to do as a tank is just keep the 2 of them taunted and hold relatively still in the center of the room. Your DPS should stack loosely around you, trying to stay as far away as possible. Make sure whenever the dark boss lays these large negate bubbles, you step out of it, as many tank skills are magicka based. And if you are standing in those negate bubbles, you're not going to be able to cast any of your magicka skills. And I got nuked by DPS of the opposite head color just stacking on top of me. Not a whole lot you can do about that as a tank. You just hope that your friends get you res back up as soon as possible. Or kill the boss. That also works. After that, we have this next trash wave room where it starts off with these 2 large cats. You can taunt these cats, but they're going to aggro to whoever has the dark blue pillars above them, so don't fret too much when they're running away from you. Then, most likely, you're going to have DPS that go and pull both the levers at the same time. This means that you're going to have trash packs of 3 to 6 enemies spawning on both the left and right side. Just do your best to keep everything taunted as the only tank. And notice how if they're not moving on the other side, I see them, but I'm not taunting them until we finish the side that we're on. Now, if you have a DPS that goes and throws a rogue damage over there and aggroes them, then you will need to get them taunted and grouped up. Again, I'm doing that method of taking the melee enemies and trying to stack them on the archer. So we finished that add wave room, and now we have the add wave hallway, where again, you see how I have this archer, I'm taking them to melees and I'm stacking them on the archer because the archer isn't going to really move, and I'm taking the melees and putting them on the archer. And the DPS are killing the Sun Eater where it's at. I don't even taunt the Sun Eater. I do apply Major Breach via caltropes and debuff other ways, but I don't even taunt Sun Eaters just because they don't really hit that hard, and I don't want them walking towards me. I want them to stay still so the DPS can kill them as quickly as possible. Alright, and finally for the last boss, the key thing is to take note, the boss, once you taunt him, he's going to jump back to the middle, but he'll come back to you again. You need to be on this first pad, and once the second pad starts lighting up golden, you need to move over to that second pad before the first pad turns blue. Once the third pad starts glowing gold, you need to start moving over to that third pad before the second pad turns blue whenever Rorkhaj slams back down on it. Just keep an eye for whenever the next pad starts glowing gold, go ahead and move to it. And why we stay on these pads, and why nobody else should be touching these pads, is because the person who's on this pad gets a buff that helps them withstand the damage from Rorkhaj. One additional thing, try not to point Rorkhaj towards your group, because whenever he does the shotgun mechanic, where he puts his hand together and shoots blue damage towards you, this will hit everything in front of him, including any teammates standing in the same direction you are. So just try not to point him on group. And again, don't touch the blue pads. Even on normal, if you touch a blue pad once, and then you touch a blue pad again, you will die. Automatic, you will die. But once the boss gets done with your nonsense, he gets down to his last few percents, he'll jump to the center, and then the damage dealers can just finish him. And that is the solo tank point of view. Alrighty, now let's talk about off-tanking Maw of Lorkhaj. For this one, this would be a group composition that has at least 2 tanks, and you've kind of coordinated with your other tank on who's main tanking and who's off tanking. For this video today, I'm not going to discuss the main tank point of view in this 2-tank situation, just because it would look a lot like the solo tank point of view. So basically follow that, with the exception of, in the trash pulls, whenever you have 2 tanks, try to coordinate who's grabbing what. Whether that's generally one tank grabs the right half of enemies, one tank grabs the left half, one tank grabs the ranged enemies, one tank grabs the melee enemies, whatever way you want to break this down. Somehow divide up who's grabbing what to keep it more efficient. But as long as things are taunted, that's the important part. For this video, I decided I was going to grab the ranged enemies, the archers in this case, and work on trying to stack those enemies on the melee enemies that my main tank was grabbing. I am also, on top of grabbing those ranged enemies, I'm also trying to help with debuffing all other enemies and buffing my teammates, either through gear or skills. For the first boss, as off-tank, there is not a lot that you are going to be doing. Key things to note is, number 1, do not stack directly on top of your main tank, because when the curses grow out, and your screen turns blue, you could share that to your main tank, which, on normal, the boss is most likely going to die before you ever have to deal with curses, but so that it doesn't spread to everybody, just keeping it on just you by not directly stacking on your tank. Another thing you can do is you can help chain in those panthers. And again, after first boss, many groups do this skip where you just hug these rocks on the right. Once you go past that little tree, a next type of enemy comes up. These are ogres. They are all melee type enemies, but if you notice something is not taunted, even if you've designated with your other tank that, hey, I'm grabbing only the ranged. If something's not taunted at all, grab it. Get it off of your damage dealers, get it debuffed. Help the group keep moving along. Sometimes with this, it just involves a little bit of dynamic decision making. And again, I'm trying to just grab those ranged, and as you see, I'm trying to outrange the archers to get them to stack on top of the melee type enemies, or the enemies that don't like to move. But again, when in doubt, if you see something is untaunted, give it a taunt, and do your best to help stack things up. Another thing of note, these negate fields from the Sun Eater, they're going to prevent you from casting any Magicka-based skills, so it's important to dodge roll out of them to get out of them as quickly as possible. If you try to walk, those negate fields snare you, causing you to take longer to get out of it. Now comes the Twins boss. For this boss, this is why many people consider that it is important to have 2 tanks in Maw of Lorkhaj. And what is supposed to happen is each tank grabs 1 boss at the start of the fight, colors get assigned, and then the tanks need to swap bosses. As you can see, there's a little bit of confusion here with my group. My other tank wasn't grabbing the opposite boss. There was a bit of confusion with that. We did get it sorted out by the end, but why you want to grab the opposite color boss is mainly to allow the damage dealers closest to you to hit the boss of the opposite color head, allowing them to do more damage to the boss of the opposite head color of their dark colored head. They want to damage the light colored boss and they'll do more damage to it. But if things go awry, just res each other, it'll be fine. You can brute force your way through it at this point on normal, just don't panic. After that boss, again, you get this ad wave room. You can taunt the large cats, but they're going to only follow after whoever has the large pillar. And on these trash waves, when your damage dealers pull both of the levers, you're going to get enemies on both sides. Most likely, it's going to end up being more like pure chaos, with enemies left and right. So just if you see something hidden on a DPS, try to get it taunted. And again, you see I'm trying to stack those ranged enemies right on top of our melee by outranging them, but for the most part, it was just pure chaos. As long as it's taunted, that's the important part. And again, here I'm trying to do that, get my ranged enemies stacked on top, using the length of this hallway to my advantage to outrange those archers. But I do notice a little bit throughout the fight that some of the melees are not taunted, so I just taunt them as I'm walking back to my archer to get them back stacked. So again, something's not taunted, get it taunted, even if it wasn't, quote, your enemy to taunt. And now on to the last boss, on Lorkhaj. Honestly, as off tank, you're not going to be doing a whole lot. The best thing you can do to help the group is, number 1, don't stand on the golden pad. That is where the main tank should be standing to get that buff to help them. And number 2, if somebody dies, you aren't doing a whole lot, so catch reses. Other than that, just buff your teammates, debuff your enemies, make sure you don't taunt the boss away from your main tank, and just do your best to help. Now to discuss a different role, the healer point of view. You have less control over how the arena is going to be set up. Of course, there's optimally where we want things to move and where we expect our tanks and damage dealers to move as a group, but there's no way of knowing that for sure, especially with a pickup group. So, for the majority of these fights, I'm going to start with placing my main heals on top of the Sun Eater, which should be the first kill priority, but as you can see, not all groups do that. So you just kind of follow where the group is and try to stay kind of in the back of the pack. One thing of note as a healer in trash pools, and why the Sun Eaters are first kill priority, is because the large blue negate bubbles, or negate AoEs, that they lay will cause players standing in them to no longer be able to cast magicka-based skills, which, as a healer, almost all of our skills are magicka-based. So make sure to stay out of those and try to aim your debuffs towards the Sun Eater so that they die quickly. With the first boss, the main thing is going to be loose stacking behind your damage dealers, while aiming for your AoE heals to be underneath your tank, especially in the case of only having one tank. Do your best to not share curses with your teammates by not tightly stacking on them, and you should be good to go. And again, make sure to wait for your tank to get ahead of the group and start the pulls as you are the healer, but try to predict where they're going to be standing and place your ground-based heals there as you are running in, and keep up your sticky heals and aim your spam heals towards your tank. For this trash room that has multiple waves, especially if you only have one tank, try to follow them and keep the heals there, and any damage dealers that are not with your tank, hopefully they figure it out and follow closer to where the healer and tank combo are. For the second boss, the best thing you can do here is be on the defensive, especially with a pug group that is not knowledgeable about the head color aspect. Just try to hang back from the group, toss your ranged heals on top of the tank, and then just put your spammables and your sticky heals on those closer to you. And when you do notice that people do get blown up on normal, it won't kill them, so you can still heal them back up. Just aim your burst heals towards those individuals and top them back up on health. And do your best to debuff the bosses as you can. But again, prioritizing not blowing up your teammates, and especially not blowing up your tank. For this lever room, on normal, if you get the blue pillar, just try to stack with the other blue pillar person so that the two large cats end up stacking, but don't worry about it too much. They don't hurt that much on normal difficulty. And whenever we have the waves of trash enemies, just again, generally lay your ground heals where your tank is, keep up your sticky heals on your teammates, and try to debuff as you can. If you notice somebody is being chased by a particular ad and the tank hasn't quite gotten it taunted yet, of course, take care of them as you can. Hopefully the tank grabs taunt. And same thing on this room. We are going to be wanting, hopefully, the Sun Eaters to die first, so that's where I'm going to be starting to place my heals and debuffs, but just kind of navigate around where the majority of the group is to give them the best buffs. And finally, for the last boss, the best thing you can do as a healer point of view would be to, number one, do not stand on the gold pads, as these are for your tank to give them a buff against Lorkhaj's damage. And number two, do not touch the blue pads more than once, because if you touch it 2 times, you will die. Guaranteed to die, even on normal Maw of Lorkhaj. So respect the dark blue pads. And whenever Lorkhaj does that shotgun damage, he puts his hand together and does blue type damage in front of him. Just try to keep those AoE heals underneath your tank as best you can. And that is the Maw of Lorkhaj point of view for a healer. Now for the last point of view that we're going to be covering for our tour of normal Maw of Lorkhaj, the damage dealer point of view. As a damage dealer, knowing your kill priority for enemies is excellent. As a damage dealer, try to kill the Sun Eaters first, as these provide the biggest issues for our tanks and our healers. After that, just try to kill whatever the tank has stacked up and debuffed already. And if you have any enemies chasing you, it is best that you run towards your tank and not away from them, so that hopefully the tank gets these enemies taunted off of you. For the first boss in Maw of Lorkhaj, the best thing is to loose stack behind the boss, give yourself some space from your other teammates, and just parse your heart out. Just focus on the big boss, ignore the small cats. They should die due to ground and damage around you, and you don't need to focus your specific single target damage on them. And don't worry about cleansing, even if your screen turns blue and you get the curse. The boss will most likely die before you need to cleanse. For the trash pulls after the first boss, we start to see these ogre enemies. For these ogre enemies, I recommend focusing the shaman first, just due to the fact that he heals his allies, but then he can also do some big damage to you if there are a lot of other small adds still alive whenever he starts his healing channel, as it creates damage around each of his allies. Additionally, if you see the renderer, or the guy with the Wolverine claws, start channeling, you can help with interrupting those. But for the most part, just follow your tank around and damage what they have taunted and debuffed. But again, if you see a Sun Eater alive, focus that first and then go to what your tank has grouped up. The Sun Eaters always spawn in the same location, so if you've been here a few times, you begin to memorize exactly where those spawn locations are. Now for the second boss, Twins. On this boss, just try to find yourself a happy spot away from your teammates. Don't move around more than you have to. If you notice that the light-headed boss is channeling a beam that looks like a Templar beam towards your tank, this can potentially be deadly to them, especially if there's only one tank and they happen to take a heavy from the dark boss at the same time as they're taking this channel from the light boss. As a damage dealer, you can go in, give the light boss a bash to interrupt that beam and save your tank, because when they are affected by this beam, they are prone and unable to block or cast any skills. For this trash room with the two large cats and the levers, don't worry if the cats are chasing you. They don't do that much damage on normal, just stay still and damage them down. And as far as the kill priority, when you got the whole packs, they should stay pretty well grouped up, but biggest focus should be on the Sun Eaters first, get out of those Sun Eater AoEs, and then just kill whatever else your tank has grouped up around you first, and then move on to whatever's left after that. And those same rules apply to the hallway of enemies. Just focus on Sun Eater, step out of those AoEs, and generally just follow your tank around to the next debuffed enemy. Biggest thing on these trash pulls is they are the longest part of this trial, and most trials honestly. So don't be afraid to throw your ultimates as soon as you have them. Now for the last boss. The biggest thing on Rakat is don't throw your damage ultimate right at the beginning of the fight. You're going to want to wait until after Rakat has done his slam in the center of the room and then come back to the first pad so that the boss will take the most damage from your damage ultimate. After that, just damage Rakat like normal. Try to stand behind him. Of course, every tank might position him a little bit differently. Generally, trying to stand behind him. Don't panic whenever you see these large AoEs falling from the sky. Just trust your healers are going to heal you out of it. And just parse your heart out. And that is how you complete Maw of Lorkhaj as a damage dealer. And with that, guys, thank you so much for watching this video about a quick, high-level how to do Maw of Lorkhaj on normal difficulty. Of course, I didn't go into every single detail about how to do every little thing in Maw of Lorkhaj. The purpose of this video was to be a high-level coverage of the basic need-to-knows for those who are just starting to get into trials and don't want to get completely overwhelmed. If you liked the video and maybe learned something new, make sure to throw a like and consider subscribing so that you get notifications for the next videos go live. And if you want to hang out with us live, we're over on Twitch multiple days a week, so you can check us out over there. Nothing else, thank you all so much for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye!